Hi, I'm Yitzhak Berger. I teach Hebrew at Risha. Parashat Naso continues a sequence of passages that discuss the temple, the role of the Kohanim in the temple, and certain rituals that were done there. Some of these rituals are less than pleasant. There are rituals that are associated with the temple, the Mikdash, but at the same time, they involve things like betrayal, the Parsha of the Sotah, other things that require bringing korbanot of expiation, of kapara, for things that were done that were perhaps wrong. In the middle of Parashat Naso, there's a small passage that really stands out, and that's the famous passage of Birkat Kohanim. Right? The Kohanim are enjoined by God to, at unspecified intervals, to turn to Klal Yisrael and say, Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, may the Lord bless you and watch over you. May the Lord shine His face over you and give you peace. The question arises as to how this really fits into the sequence. It is, after all, one of the roles of the Kohanim, but it really seems to stand out in its context. To understand this, it'll pay to consider what are really two separate roles of the Mishkan, which are actually highlighted by different ones of the commentators when asking what the fundamental role of the Mishkan is. When the Mishkan is introduced back in Sefer Shemot, there's a debate as to whether the Mishkan is fundamentally a place of Shekhinah, a place where God dwells, and the different forms of worship, the avodot that are done there, are really just a vehicle to that, or in a way incidental to that. Or whether it's really characterized as a place of worship. And in a place of worship, God's name will dwell. This manifests itself in a debate as to how you count the mitzvot of constructing the various furnishings of the Mikdash. Is this one larger mitzvah to construct these furnishings that are used for worship, whereas the fundamental role of the Mikdash is really God's Shekhinah? Or alternatively, is worship the whole thing, in which case every detail that composes the totality of that worship gets a mitzvah of its own? Everyone agrees that both of these components characterize the Mishkan. The question is what we concentrate on. And here in these parshiyot, what we really encounter is a heavy emphasis on the service, the worship, the avodot. All of Sefer Vayikra, up until several components of its latter half, which are broader, and then Sefer Bamidbar, particularly beginning with Parashat Naso, which speaks about certain specific rituals that the Kohanim must do in the Mikdash, rituals that we don't necessarily associate with Shekhinah. They're rituals that really highlight and emphasize the capacity of the Mishkan as a place of ritual service. The ritual of the Sotah and the ritual of the Nazir perhaps being the best examples of things that we might associate less with Shekhinah and more with specific, detailed forms of service. But the Parsha of Naso wants to turn to something else. It wants to then turn to what happened when Moshe finishes constructing the Mishkan. How did they then dedicate it? How did they sanctify it? And all of the Nisi'im, the heads of the different Shvatim, were going to be given an opportunity to bring korbanot on behalf of their shevet, to consecrate it. And their orientation might have been to see those korbanot as just yet another ritual. We have korbanot for this, korbanot for that, and we also have korbanot that are brought to sanctify the Mishkan as a place of service. And I would suggest that it's right before that the Torah sticks in the Parsha of Birkat Kohanim in order to remind us that the Mishkan, and in turn what the Nesi'im are really doing in this latter part of Parashat Naso, really needs to bring to mind that other aspect of the Mishkan, and perhaps the most fundamental aspect of the Mishkan, and that is a place of Shekhinah. For all of the ritual work that the Kohanim did, for all of the formal services that were done. The Kohanim's role is also that of eliciting God's blessing onto Bnei Yisrael. It's a place of experiencing the Shekhinah and experiencing the brachot that come from being in the presence of the Shekhinah. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. So the Parsha of Birkat Kohanim appears right here in the middle of Naso, reminding you of that aspect and encouraging us to view the dedication of the Mikdash that consisted of the korbanot of the Nisi'im in that light. Yes, the korbanot, the Nisi'im needed to bring all of these korbanot in order to dedicate the Mishkan, but the purpose of those korbanot was not merely to be one of many ritual sacrifices or ritual sequences that were prescribed to do in that Mishkan. Rather, the purpose was to elicit the Shekhinah, something that will bring bracha, shmirah, and ha'arat panim upon Klal Yisrael, per the Birkat Kohanim that the Torah presents immediately beforehand. Shabbat Shalom.